You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. This is not your usual episode. We are meeting under emergency situation here. Me and Jason were actually going to talk about the draft. We had everything ready to go.
Look at all this information here.
Look at him. He
doesn't
was
even
ready
matter anymore.
Man, I had a bunch of videos set up and everything, but man, we got to pivot because we just learned about Deebo Samuel requesting a trade from the San Francisco 49ers. So we'll get into that really quickly. Just want to intro my guest here. I mean, you all know who he is, Jason Aponte. One half of the Sprint Right Option Pod, one half of our hearts. I mean, he's here with us today, lending his time. We really appreciate him being on. So, Jason, first I want to ask you, what do you think about this news? I mean, we kind of saw some writing on the wall leading up to this, and now it seems like it's official. So what can we make of this news?
I think that right now the biggest lesson is that many negotiations going forward with not just Deebo Samuel, with many players in his age group that believe that they're going to be worth a certain amount of money. Some you'll watch play out in real time, like this today. You know, we watched everything play out in real time in terms of negotiations, where Deebo Samuel was obviously not happy. Scrubs Instagram. Okay, you can look at that and say maybe that's nothing, right? Then the whole unfollowing the 49ers thing is the same thing, and now we find out that his brother's like, yeah, he's requesting a trade. Adam Schefter yesterday, what many thought was speculation, felt like something placed by the 49ers PR department to him in order to let people know and kind of soften the blow now, right? So the trade request comes in today per Jeff Darlington of ESPN, but yesterday was a masterclass in PR and softening the blow. The 49ers are basically like, we're trying. He doesn't want to, and here's why. And they did it all through Adam Schefter, and I think that's the portion of it. So many people were pointing to, well, he was wrong about Mac Jones, things like that. Okay, he was. But something about yesterday, the timing of Adam Schefter, the way he was saying it out of nowhere, and then his brother to say that, and then the weirder part was the brother coming out and saying, well, I don't really know anything. No. That was your brother calling you, his team calling you and saying, bro, you need to get that out of there. Like, that's not how we want to announce this. So all of this stuff makes sense now. And here we are. I mean, at this point, it all was right there in front of us yesterday. I didn't view it that way. It is what it is. It was clearly what the 49ers goal was to put this out there to soften the blow, because they knew this was eventually going to come out. And now that we found out that Jeff Darlington saying that this request came about a week or two ago, then all these other things start to make sense now at this point.
Yeah, because that really lines up with him like scrubbing the 49ers from his Instagram. And, you know, it seems like the issue is not so much the money aspect. Like you mentioned, the 49ers are willing to pay him. Like that's what Adam Schefter said. Ian Rappaport saying the same thing. But again, maybe this is all PR. Maybe they're trying to soften the blow. Ian Rappaport said there could – I think I'm trying to find the tweet. There's a lot going on. But I can find it. Pretty much he mentioned that it's not just the money. Here's the tweet. Money is not at the root of the issues for Deebo Samuel. Otherwise, it could be fixed with a big offer. But there are also issues with how he's used. So what do you think about that? Because, I mean, I think the way that the 49ers used him, I mean, obviously – he was used as a running back a lot. So do you think maybe he was not that's something that he wasn't all for?
Yeah, and I think that when you come to the negotiating table and you say, well, that's not how running backs get paid and you were used this way, I think that's what kind of muddies the water when in terms of the negotiation. And I guess Deebo just wasn't happy with it. Again, the first offer was something that he didn't like, and whether it has to do with the way he was utilized or the way that they came to the table, we may never know. But at this point, who could blame the guy, right? I mean, this year, in the Green Bay game, he's like falling over, limping around, and he's still trying to finish things off. Like his body was put to the line. That's why I think you saw all that emotion in the NFC Championship game of him, it's less about that he lost the game, is that this man put it all on the line. So I completely agree with him in that portion of, NFL careers are as short as they are anyway. Imagine now asking him to do all of these other things as well. Just because a guy can do it doesn't mean that you should use him that way all the time. And I guess that's the way Deebo's looking at it at this point. So protect your health, protect your money, and your body is your money maker for as long as you can in the NFL. So it is what it is with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Protect your money, like you said, which is very important because I know that, Deebo Samuel mentioned that he was receiving death threats, just last week. And so with this sort of news, I imagine, some people are going to go crazy and start saying bad things to him. And so, I just want to say to anyone listening, like, don't do that. I mean, Deebo is doing what is best for him, what he feels is right for him. And so we cannot judge him on that. These players are human as well. Dawson had a question. Why haven't the 49ers had visits from first round talents if they knew that this would happen? One notable thing that happened last week that I felt like a lot of people kind of swept under the rug was the fact that they attended Drake London's pro day. His pro day. It wasn't USC's pro day. They had USC's pro day in March when 15 other players participated. They were at that one as well. But the one that happened, I think it was last week, was only Drake London, and the 49ers were there. Drake London is a first-round talent, and so it makes sense that with the timeline that we're talking about, that Deebo Samuel, requested this trade a week or two ago, that now they're like, oh shit, like we better start looking into these first-round wide receivers, right? And so they haven't had a first-round talent in for a visit, as far as I know, but they're looking into it. They're doing due diligence, and I mean, we'll see what happens from here. I think there's been a lot of wide receivers that they've been looking into or that they've had for a visit in the last week that we've been hearing about. And so what do you think about that, Jordan? I mean, Jason, how do they pivot in the draft now? There's a lot. I feel like there's a lot that's going on. Yesterday, we also heard Alex Mack, he might not be returning. And so like, there's a little bit of panic now. We're like a week from the draft. So how do the 49ers pivot with this news?
Well, if Deebo Samuel is not traded during the draft, then I'd say it's a lot safer bet that he's not traded at all, because you don't trade Deebo Samuel for next year's first. You trade him for immediately this year's first, whatever that is. Now, if that's the Jets, then it's between 4 and 10. Then you take 10, right? If that's the way that it is, and you have to be blown away by the deal. Let's just be clear. He's requested a trade. The 49ers are in no position to just automatically trade him just because he asked. So that's another thing, right? This is just one twist to this. It does mean that he does want to leave, right? The requesting of a trade doesn't mean that he wants to stay, right? At least at this point in where negotiations have gone. But the 49ers don't have to do anything. They have the leverage. And once you pass the NFL draft, your leverage goes now, because you would have to hold out. And if you want to hold out, that's fine. You cannot get that money back, okay? You're going to get fined and fined and fined and fined. And that's just how it is. And if you want to play that game, that's up to you. That's up to you, Deebo. But if it's not done in the draft, then it's not going to happen. So this just throws a little bit more intrigue into the draft. Now, if the 49ers do trade him, now they're in a top 10 position, because you can garner that sort of pick, especially when you think about how the league has been trying to find Deebo Samuel since he entered the league. And he was literally the talk of the combine everywhere else. I'd say for some reason, Deebo Samuel was just being spoke about when you talk about prospects, when GMs were talking about their philosophy in the draft and such. But it'll be up high, and then you can make your decision on a wide receiver or whatever it is. You can go best player available, whatever it is that you feel that's best. Maybe you get a second rounder as well, too, where you can address the position. So it gives the 49ers a little bit more flexibility if they do get that top 10, top 12 pick, which I believe they would if they are trading Deebo Samuel. But again, if this doesn't happen during the draft, it's probably not going to happen. And then things will either they'll have to meet in the middle, or they're just going to stay on both sides, and Deebo's going to do what's best for him. So I think this just throws a lot of intrigue on Thursday, which would be round one. If he's not gone Thursday, you're not moving him for a second rounder. That's malpractice at this point, especially for all the reasons that we talked about. So Thursday is going to be the biggest tell. We've got a week. So yeah, he does have less leverage. And I mean, that's the thing. There's no fifth-year option. He can be franchise tagged he and again, the holdout rules are very specific about this on the CBA, and this is the reason that they came back to the table was holdouts are done. And now if you do hold out, it used to be that the team could waive those things or maybe pay. Like, no, now that's just not happening. So it's either he's going to pay or the team has got to pay, because that money is something that you can't just waive anymore at this point. So again, if this doesn't happen Thursday, then they're going to have to get back to the table. So while this isn't the best news about the trade, it's still not done. Like, it's still not over. I feel like this has a little bit more twist to it, like a little bit more to go through. So
Yeah, and we recall when Raheem Mostert, requested a trade. He was trying to get a little raise going as well a couple years ago, and we saw how that ended up. He got his money. He stayed with the team, but I wonder if things are too far gone for the 49ers and Deebo Samuel. I mean, it seems like the only issue is not money, and like we just said, he has issues with the way he was used. That can always change. Like, Kyle Shanahan could change the way he uses him. I mean, with Trey Lance coming into play, I'm sure he could use Deebo Samuel in different ways, but is there a part of you that feels like, this is too far gone with Deebo Samuel, and there's no turning back, and the relationship is just irreparable?
certainly looks that way. I mean, that's a fair assessment for anybody looking in. And the difference between what Raheem Mostert did and what Deebo Samuel is doing is Raheem Mostert just wanted to be the highest paid running back on the team, and Deebo Samuel wants to be one of the highest in the league. So for me, like, that was an easy meet in the middle thing with Raheem Mostert, where you change some money around, you give him guaranteed money, and boom, now he's making more money than Tevin Coleman. That's all that he really wanted. So I looked at that situation too because of how quickly they course corrected it. But I don't feel like it's apples to apples, only because he just wanted a raise in terms of who's the running back on his team, as opposed to what Deebo is looking for in the Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, those type of guys. So there is a world where this is too far gone. The reason that I can't say that it's too far gone is because I don't have any intricate knowledge of what's being said, what's going on, what the real discussions are. But you can tell the games that are being played on both sides right now. Deebo started it. The 49ers used Schefter yesterday to put out a PR statement that we tried. We have all the money to sign him. He doesn't want to be here. And then, boom, the trade comes out the next day. So it all kind of lines up, but it all lines up in a way that the 49ers are playing the same game that Deebo is. This is just watching a negotiation play out in real time in public. And that's something the 49er fans aren't necessarily used to. With George Kittle, we realized that the first offer was called St. Valentine's Day Massacre, but that was something that came out afterwards. It wasn't like it was something that they went through, throughout the negotiations. So this is a little bit different in that way, but it's not going to be too far different from the way other wide receivers, other players are going to approach this, because if Deebo Samuel gets what he wants, then that's a good step in the direction for the players. And you can already see A.J. Brown, who's represented by the same agent, is doing the same thing as Deebo Samuel. So at this point, there is a world where it's too far gone. It doesn't look good right now. I'll tell you right now, that does not look good, a request on a trade. But I'm not certain as to if people understand, certain milestones. Like, if you can't get him gone by Thursday, then you guys got to figure out a way to make this work at this point. Like, you've got to take the money, you've got to take the stress off him at least a little bit, and you've got to find middle ground, because he's not going to get moved. You don't trade Deebo Samuel for next year's first round pick. It's just a waste. It's just an absolute waste.
Right. No, I agree. And Adam Schefter just recently tweeted out, just because Deebo Samuel has requested a trade doesn't mean the 49ers have to make one, just as you were saying, Jason. But at the very least, one gigantic subplot to mix into draft week. So we'll continue to monitor the situation, as you mentioned as well, Jason, like the other wide receivers that are waiting for a deal, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf. They're all represented by the same agent, and I'm sure they all want to be, the last one to sign between the three. And so I don't know how, the agent's going to handle that, because you have three guys waiting for a deal. They all want the most money between the three. And so it just seems like, you mentioned AJ Brown as well has taken any mention of the Titans from his Twitter bio. And so kind of trying to do the same thing. And so I don't really know what the end game here is for these players and for Tory Dandy, but we'll see what happens. And man, I just don't know what happens from here.
Why can't we have anything nice, Steph?
Dude, okay. So I'm like pissed and like half blaming myself because after the season ended, I was like, I'm gonna buy a Deebo jersey. Like I just know they're gonna
Well,
get
don't
a
do
deal.
that.
I just know
Don't
they're
do
gonna get a
that.
deal done. Like he's just so good. Like how could they not? Right. And so I got the freaking jersey, man, and look what happened. I might just retire from buying jerseys if he ends up getting traded. So that would be on me. But man, I might have jinxed this whole thing for the 49ers and for Deebo. Um,
Don't blame
what are
yourself. I
some
mean, honestly, I waited until Fred signed his deal, and I was like, all right, he ain't going anywhere. I was like, we're good. Like, then I'll buy his
see,
jersey.
see, I usually wait, but I did not for this one, and so I am kicking myself a little bit. I mean, hopefully the 49ers can get something worked out. And as you mentioned, I mean, I think negotiations are always tough and there's always some snags. We mentioned George Kittle, um, things we heard about that deal after the fact. And the difference with Deebo Samuel is that it's very public and he's making it very public. And so do you think by him, putting all this stuff out there, scrubbing his Instagram and now announcing publicly via reports that he wants to be traded. Is that him trying to get more leverage in the situation?
Yeah, and it's keeping his name in the dialogue, and it's keeping his name, brought up the entire time in the news cycle as well. And it's just, again, social media is the way that things. Social media is always the way that these things are playing out now at this point. Like especially when you're talking about these younger people, right? Because you can reach more masses, you can control your own narrative. And a lot of football players are doing that now at this point because so many media people and they're allowed to twist what's going on, and those guys sometimes hold back from really blasting those guys for not really knowing what's going on. But a lot of players are controlling their own narrative. That's what Deebo wanted to do, and I think that's what he succeeded in doing. Here we are now at this point. And like I pointed this out a few times. It's just kind of the way the players are requesting trades and things like that indirectly until they finally come out. Like, I mean, Odell Beckham didn't necessarily request a trade. His father just posted something on social media with him just not being thrown the ball. And they said, all right, we got to get this guy out of here. That's an informal trade request. And that's how the social media is being used right now at this point. Very aware of it, obviously, with the same representation. And now AJ Brown's doing the same thing. Seems to be a strategy. And yeah, I mean, just how things, I think a lot of the things that people are learning is less about Deebo Samuel, the player, the person, whatever it is, whatever conclusions you want to jump to, because I applaud that man for getting every single dollar. And if there's something wrong and he don't want to work there, that's fine. How many people would work a job that they don't want to work for that employer anymore? Even if you're like, oh, you're crazy, they're going to give you all of that amount of money. Like, is there something going on that is more valuable than money? What is your price for peace of mind? Right. So if Deebo doesn't want to be here for whatever reason, the money's not going to ease that. So again, you can't attack the player. You can't attack the person. So you making assumptions on all of those things. You don't really know what's going on, and you wouldn't work a job no matter how much money you were getting if you didn't like your employer for whatever reason, or you weren't happy working. So with that, you're kind of just learning how things are going. And I think what a lot of people have learned is that this is the new wave of negotiating. So while people want to throw around diva and this and that about these guys, this is going to be the norm. And it's always, I don't want to be a jerk, older people that are upset with all this. Well, back in my day. Yeah, back in your day, there was no Instagram. There was none of that. That's not how any of this was utilized. Yeah, so calm down. This is the way things are going now. And you got to take your feelings out of it because you're not in control of it. And these guys want to control their narrative and get paid. So while it may hurt for a little bit, promise you life's going to go on if something happens with him getting moved. Promise you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for saying that because I think that's something that fans often forget. But let's talk about potential compensation that the 49ers could get for Deebo Samuel. I mean, we just saw Tyreek Hill this offseason go for more than a first, and I would assume Deebo Samuel would also go for more than a first. That's probably just the bare minimum to even talk to John Lynch right now. So what's potential compensation that the 49ers could get?
Well, here's the thing. The Jets were in on Tyreek Hill. They've got 4-10. I mean, look, if the Jets were silly enough to say 4-10, it's hard to say anybody wouldn't be moved in that scenario, right? 4-10, that means the 49ers, you minus Deebo Samuel, but you could potentially walk away with Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson. sounds pretty good to me, in my opinion, right? Like that in that way, right? But you're probably looking at the Jets and the team that keeps popping up. If you notice the tweets and everything, Houston at 13, right? And it depends on what they're willing to do. I mean, if he wants to go there, here's my thing. I mentioned all of those things about him being unhappy with the 49ers, but you need to find out what they're really unhappy about, because if you are unhappy with that employer, you being traded to the Houston Texans and that organization, I'm not certain what's going on with the 49ers, but I'm certain that the culture is much better than what's going on in Houston for obvious reasons, guys. That organization isn't exactly the model of consistency, class, winning, any sort of. So if it's what's going on with the 49ers, what's worse, the devil you know or the devil you don't know? I don't know what's going on with the 49ers unless he was severely disrespected. I'm not going to comment on that. But I know for a fact that the Houston Texans are not run as a better organization just based on objective facts and the way that they've moved the last 4 or 5 years with all of their athletes. And it's all documented right there. So it's going to be Houston. It's going to be the Jets. It depends, because the Dolphins would have been in on that apparently, but I'm looking at those two. And I think Houston's the one that kind of makes a little bit more sense. But then I have to question Deebo in terms of, well, if it's not about the money and you want to get away from the Niners, what is it about that it makes the Houston Texans a more desirable location, especially when you consider where they're at rebuilding and how that organization is run? It just, that one would make little sense to me if he approves something like that. So it just makes Thursday super interesting now. And 49ers fans are going to be now. And now you thought on Thursday you were going to have nothing to do, no first round pick. Well, guess what?
Oh man, we're gonna be watching real closely. I'll tell you that. But going back to that, I know Ravens as well was another team that I've been mentioning. Ravens fans have been all over it. I mean, I don't know if there's any team in the NFL that wouldn't want this deal done for them, at least from the fans' perspective. But you mentioned one question here. How would you guys feel about drafting Christian Watson with one of the picks we would get from a trade package? I'll answer this really quickly. Obviously not an early first. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to get a first, and I would assume it would be an early first for Deebo Samuel. If the 49ers are trying to get something for him, they're going to try to get the best offer out there. And so I would think the closest you are, within the top 10, the better, and you would take that deal. And so Christian Watson, he's really great. And I know a lot of 49er fans have been hyping him up throughout this whole process. Obviously he played with Trey Lance. That's part of the intrigue with him. But I mean, I would go for someone, that's at the top. You mentioned Garrett Wilson, Olave is another one. So what do you think about this, Jason? Would you go Christian Watson or someone even better?
Yeah, I don't want to be the rain on the parade, but I finally went through my 1 through 10 wide receivers. And the more I watch Christian Watson, the more I'm a little bit lost when it comes to what everyone is super excited about, because so many people want to correlate what happened with Jamar Chase and Joey Burrow. And I don't think that that's fair at all. I don't think that if you're expecting that, you're putting this guy in a position where he can't win, because that's not going to happen. So while I have him as a top 10 wide receiver, I have him officially at 9 for my draft. If he's going to get a high early pick, it's going to be for one of those other guys that are a little bit more of a slam dunk. Maybe a Jameson Williams slides a little bit. That would be impeccable. He's the only reason he's not my number one is because he had the injury. Garrett Wilson's my number one, right? And there's so many guys. Like you mentioned, they went to see Drake London. I'm not even that big on Drake London, but I have him ahead of Christian Watson as well, too. So there are a lot of other guys. I get the whole comparison, and I get, he played with Trey and everything as well, too, and he's an athletic freak. I get all those things. I still have concerns with the way that he's going to be beating press coverage and better corners up here at the top of the league because of a little bit of his competition. So, I mean, if they get a high early pick, then it's going to be one of those top end guys, and that is exciting. It may not be what you're getting from Deebo because it's one of one, and he literally just did something that nobody has ever done in terms of numbers. But getting another flanker wide receiver out there with what should be more of a vertical passing attack, that would be okay with me. I mean, if push comes to shove and you have to move Deebo, I don't like it, but if that's what's going to happen, then you have to do it.
And it's probably not even crazy to think that they might look at drafting 2 wide receivers in the draft if they do move Deebo Samuel. Another question that I have about, potentially moving him, you mentioned, like, would he even accept the trade to the Texans? Like, why would he want to go there? Would the 49ers even want to honor, where he would want to go at this point with everything that's gone on and how it's happened?
I mean, it's in a much more precarious spot than it was with Jimmy Garoppolo. I think they both kind of agreed, hey, listen, this is what's going to happen next year, but we're going to do everything we can to put you in a spot. Not requesting, forcing his way out. Say what you want. We're watching publicly quarterbacks crumble, losing their jobs to other people. And Jimmy Garoppolo, for, whatever you guys want to say, never caused a stir up, nothing like that. It was just, professional about the whole thing. So I could see why they would work with him and not send him to Siberia or something like that. But I don't see why you would have the same sort of inkling to help him out, especially when you're trying to take the best offer on day one. And usually those teams that are up at the top 10 aren't good teams. So, I mean, you're not going to send him to Green Bay just because he did something good for you and then he requested a trade, because then you're picking at the bottom of the first and you just loaded up one of your rivals. So I don't know why they would go out of their way to help him in this regard. So, I mean, in the same way that I'm telling you, be player friendly, because I'm always on the player side. As a team, why would you say, hey, we're going to help you out, Deebo? Let's send you off to somewhere where you can really play well and win a bunch of games? No. If you come up with the 4th or the 10th pick, you're going to the Jets. And Godspeed to you, because that's what it is. Like, that's it. We're not helping you in any way. So,
which, Robert Saleh's over there. I'm sure he wouldn't mind that too much.
And LaFleur, and they run the same offense. That's cool. Like, I get it.
Yeah, so that could work. But man, what a crazy offseason this would be if, Deebo Samuel is traded before Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, I don't think anything about this offseason has been what we've expected at all.
Steph, and this was supposed to be the easy offseason, coming off of the last offseason where we tried to kill each other over quarterback quotes and everything and trying to figure out who the quarterback is. This was supposed to be easy, right? Like, look, they lost in the NFC Championship, and I was like, hey, man, that really sucked, but we're on to the next page. Everything looks good. We've got everything in front of us. This is the San Francisco 49ers we're talking about, baby. It's never going to be easy. It's the gift that keeps on giving, the content-creating team. You don't have to clickbait for the 49ers, because the 49ers are clickbait, and here we are.
No, you really don't. Jason, I know you got to get going in a bit, but if you want to give any final thoughts about the situation and what's your hope for what happens in the next week with Deebo?
Everybody panic, throw your chairs out the window, light things on fire, and run through the streets yelling. I'm just kidding, guys. Look, right now, a request is just that. It's just a request. I choose to look at that literally. Clearly, that means he doesn't want to be here, which is also the literal definition of the trade request. At the same time, the 49ers don't have to do anything. And again, once we pass Thursday, then it's going to become more, okay, now you got to kind of meet us in the middle now, and we've got to figure this out. Now, whether this is a utilization thing, whether you were disrespected by somebody in the building, because it's not a money thing. The 49ers have all the money that they can to give you, and they're ready to sign you, but you don't want to be at the table. Got to figure out that middle ground into what could bring you back, because you are possibly looking at sitting out, which is not going to help you. This is not how this works anymore. It used to be that holdouts would happen. Hey, if you wound up on the team week 3, week 4, cool. We're going to take all those training camp fines. We're going to take those game checks, and we're going to fix them out for you. Nope, not happening anymore. It's part of the CBA. The CBA was the meet in the middle was no holdouts, and you guys could smoke weed again. So they were like, yep, and they fixed it like in that way. And that's part of the new CBA. That's the part that leads me to believe that the 49ers still have more leverage than Deebo Samuel does at this point if things don't get done on Thursday.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Really quickly before we get you out of here, some guy on Twitter, and I'm not gonna say his account or anything, you guys might know, has been suggesting that Deebo Samuel wants out because Trey Lance is going to be the starting quarterback. What do you have to say about that?
I doubt it. I really doubt that. I mean, that is some big brain activity right there. I mean, look, right now people are racking their brains trying to put interviews together, trying to put statements together to try to come to the most logical conclusion. That's not one of them. I mean, why can't it just be that he doesn't want to be there anymore because of something that's happened? Again, that's pure speculation. That's somebody who's trying to run with a narrative and is dug in on the narrative, whoever that is. I'm sure that sounds like somebody who has a strong narrative that they want to push about Trey Lance not being good, and they're just going to use this. But the good news is those narratives are perpetuated by people that aren't impactful in our business. I would say the best way. So, I mean, you just see that, you kind of just scroll past it and you move along. I definitely have a tough time believing that one.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Jason, thank you so much for coming on today and basically switching the whole topic of the podcast on short notice. We had the DBs that we were going to talk about. You might have to come back some other time before the draft to talk about that. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. 49er fans, don't panic. I mean, okay, maybe a little, but try to maybe a little panic. Try to keep your head above water, and don't be mean to Deebo Samuel. He doesn't deserve it. He's a human being just like all of us. So no hate comments to Deebo Samuel, please. And you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Friday, I have another prospect spotlight interview with EJ LeBaze. So tune in for that on Friday. But yeah, man, thanks, Jason. Thank you guys for watching, and peace.